I'm Lalena Fisher, and this is my studio. Welcome. A lot of creative projects happen in here, actually. You can see I make mixed media painting, for one thing. I also have a band with my daughter, who's 12. She's a drummer. We're called the mother mold. It's a sculptural term. A mother mold is the exterior structural supportive casing in a mold to cast resin, which I'll talk more about later. Anyway, we're recording our album right now during the pandemic. And then I also make children's books and children's illustration. And that is my dog, Gabby. She's my studio buddy. I use fabrics in my painting work because it evokes a kind of nostalgia for me. And it reminds me of my grandmother, who's a wonderful seamstress or sewist, as we say these days. I think there's an interesting connection between the stitches of sewing and the stitches of surgery that women in my family, including I, have had because of a mutation that affects only women and our reproductive organs. But I also just like the aesthetics of sort of the layering and cutting apart and somehow attaching back together. Like, I'm very inspired by some arte povera artists like Alberto Buri. In fact, you can see over here on this wall where I have images that inspire me, I have some of his work. And I like kind of the desperation and kind of aggressive creativity of forcing these things together that maybe don't look like they would go together, but they end up looking beautiful. This is my main studio space, but my garage also serves as some studio space as well. The really messy stuff and stinky toxic stuff happens in the garage. For instance, I made a sculpture that's a resin star that's cast from one of those barn stars that you see a lot in Texas. But I used red resin and 39 miniature women's shoes because there had just come out a study that found that 39 out of 100,000 Texas women who had been pregnant had died of maternal causes. And I was really moved and affected by that. And I'm making a connection sort of between not just that very specific topic, but also how women can be trapped or isolated or frozen out of the power structures, especially in Texas, where the legislature, for instance, is like 25% women or something, and they're making the laws for all of us. So I used this iconic symbol, Texas symbol of the Lone Star. And the fact is, there are a lot of stereotypes about Texas and what Texas identity is, but it really is Texas identity of only certain people, because women have always been here too, people of color have always been here too, and make up a big part of Texas history and culture. I feel a kinship with some modern contemporary Japanese art, even though that comes from a very different tradition, of course. But I am attracted to the fact and connect with the fact that childlike characters in Japanese contemporary art, fine art, are just an integral part of a lot of it. Whether you're talking about Yoshitomo Nara and his childlike characters. I like the simple strokes, which also connect with me to, like, Franz Kline is one of my favorite abstract expressionist painters. So I'm kind of connecting all of those things. I think it's interesting that in Japanese art it's kind of acceptable to have childlike characters in contemporary art. But somehow in the States, it's not so common. Another work of sculpture that I did last year in 2019, I filled the floor of the Texas Capitol Rotunda with paper Mary Jane shoes and a disassembled AR-15 rifle for the first week of the legislative session. And I had two friends accompany me with their work, Naomi Spinnick with a flag that she made, a quilted flag, and Mi-san Kim with some architectural drawings that are really interesting. A lot of them are real buildings whose floor plans happen to be shaped like guns. Anyway, I was trying to confront lawmakers with the fact that there are a lot of people in this state that they're not listening to. March for Our Lives had happened, and kids all over the country were marching for better gun legislation, and I found that really inspiring. And so this was sort of a tribute to them and an actualization of the voices of young people and the voices of other people who are underrepresented. I did a drawing based on an AR-15 that I traced. I went into a gun store here in town, and they were nice enough to take apart the AR-15 and talk about guns with me. And so I traced this gun and I made a drawing, and after I was looking at it and I wanted to kind of color on it and stuff, I noticed that it kind of ended up in the shape of the United States. And so it made me think about how guns mean so many different things to so many different people, partially depending on where you live. Also growing out of that work, part of that work was these handmade flowers, which, by the way, the flowers, which were made out of this bread dough that has a long history in Mexican-American culture, of women making their daughters and granddaughters little heirlooms out of homemade dough that you can make out of white bread and glue and lotion. And I saw someone wearing a wreath of flowers in line for First Communion when I went with my daughter, and I just thought it was so beautiful and special that something so ordinary, materials, could be made into something so special and lasting, and have such love. So anyway, these flowers are part of that piece, the installation in the Capitol. And a community of friends and family got together and made the flowers and the shoes, and without them it couldn't have happened. But after that, I also made a piece with the same material in the shape of a bunch of bullets in different sizes, and I call it ammunition. And with that, I'm connecting kind of the ammunition that mothers and grandmothers give our children, our girls, which really comes from love rather than actual bullets, but at least for some things, it really does arm them.